Are you ready to join me in transforming fear to freedom? That's the objective of the show. Are you ready to explore with me and my guests? Are you ready to get into the deep and play? This is where it's at, and that's what it's all about. No medical advice here. Use discernment and decide for yourself if the information is right for you. All views and opinions expressed on this show belong to the individual and are not necessarily shared with the producer of the show. Want more details? Go to letsgetrealchattingwithcatherine.com. Now let's get real and have some fun. Who are we going to explore with today? Come on with me and let's get into the deep.
Welcome back. Welcome back to another episode of Let's Get Real, Chatting with Catherine. And we're chatting today with Norma Cowie. And I love Norma Cowie's insight, wisdom, and how she so easily shares it with us. She is a teacher. She is a metaphysical researcher and student, always curious and always learning more. She is also the author of several books on metaphysical understandings. She is an expert in tarot and other teachings. She talks a lot about and understands past life regression work and healing work, as well as soul origin works and so forth. You can read all about Norma on lgrcc.com. If you go to the top navigation bar, you'll see guest link there, and there's profiles there, and Norma's page is featured there. You can also work with her personally. I know she does private sessions still. She's lecturing. She's willing to travel to share this information, get it out there, help people to get empowered and know what we're dealing with here. Oh man, she has really traveled some interesting paths, and I just love how easy and grounded she is about sharing with us. So Norma Cowie, psychic life consultant, and she has her own page on Facebook as well that you can check it out as well. So let's get into this chat right now and see where it goes. I know it's always exciting to chat with Norma. Thank you, and don't hesitate to share, like us on YouTube, and subscribe to the channel, of course. Get your updates from lgrcc.com right on the website, and you can get a free self-esteem meditation by doing so, as well as you can get your updates on what's coming and what's happening. So we're not just talking metaphysical on the lgrcc.com. We are talking about everything: politics, social, medical, whatever's new, exciting, transforming fear, moving into freedom by getting to know each other. This is a pretty amazing planet, and I'm so glad you decided to share your time with us. So right now, Norma Cowie on Let's Get Real, Chatting with
So we are back once again on Let's Get Real, Chatting with Catherine, with the amazing Norma Cowie, and we are going to be chatting with her about, I'm going to kind of get into the past lives thing, but we'll go where it goes. And because I know we've talked about past lives before, Norma, but I feel like there's some more stuff that has come up that I kind of want to get some answers, so I figure so do the viewers and listeners. So welcome again. Thank you for joining me.
It is a great pleasure, and I'm happy to be here.
It's always a treat. And so past lives is something that you are, that's kind of one of your areas of expertise. Like, you've been doing a lot in exploring past lives for a fairly long time. Am I correct?
Yes, it has been a long time. After the tarot, it was the second, you might say, thing that I became, I was going to say expert, I'll keep it at that, an expert in. I've done a lot of regressions. I've done past life regression workshops pretty well all over the world. With great success, I might add. I have very good success in groups. And I have come to realize over the years, because when I first got into past life work or looking at it, I wasn't 100% sure that if it was real or not. Yeah. I kind of was just filing the information I was gathering. But then I became very convinced that it is definitely a large part of who we are. Now, whether we look at it, some people look at it as alternate realities, and some people look at it in many different ways. But the thing is, it's not only past lives, there's also future lives. And not everybody can go and see a future life, which is interesting. I find when I'm doing workshops, especially when I'm training people to become past life regressionists, which I do every year in the spring, I want them to recognize that not only do we have past lives, but we also have future lives. And then I found a certain percentage just can't go there. It's like their minds just can't comprehend that.
Right.
So and that came up quite unexpectedly in a workshop once that I was doing, when I forgot to say, I want you to go back to a past life. I just said, I want you to go to a life. And this lady went way into the future.
Okay. Now you brought up a couple of things there that are part of the things I've been thinking about. So past life, future life, it sort of talks about time, and we kind of know time doesn't really exist except for here in our kind of reality. So I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. I'm asking you to kind of give a little more what you've found, and because people talk also about alternate realities, like other dimensions, like Earth life like this, but it's in a different dimension. So are we able to, when we look at past lives, would they all be on this planet in this dimension? Or
not necessarily, but the majority are.
Okay.
A lot of it, see, can I just be a bit philosophical here for a minute?
Yes.
One of the major reasons that past lives is so important is because from conception on, whenever we encounter an emotion, strong one, we reach back in our memory banks and we make the same decision we made the last time we experienced that emotion. Consequently, all our early decision making comes from past lives, and we hook into those particular past lives. So when we're going back to see where that decision was made, or maybe even then, we usually are just going back to another life in this environment. But if you were to go back to see when when that decision was originally made, you could slip into another dimension, probably more planet. Doesn't happen often, but it can.
So if we are because this kind of brings up the importance of why would we even care if we had a past life or not, but there's an emotional, like if we're living this life and we find ourselves doing things and we just wish we wouldn't, and then we say, well, I don't know, I've always reacted that way about whatever, money or relationships or whatever. You're saying that it comes from that initial first time it happens when we're a child, the situation, and we tap into an emotion experience from a previous experience and then redo the same thing. Am I getting that right?
Yep, you're getting it right. What I found out is that basically our major programming is usually in place by 18 months old. So we're not even verbal yet. But our major programs are in place. And this is what a lot of people don't realize. And so we might go to try deliberately, to change behavior, to change responses, but without it's hard work. A lot of hard work. It's supposed to be easy. But the only way to really do it is to either go back and transform it yourself, or have somebody like me who does transformational work for people, where we go in and we do that for you. In fact, I was having a conversation about that just last night with someone, where I said how life takes us and puts us into a different way, because I always said we had to do our own work. That was one of the things I stood on, like, you've got to do your own work. And then I said, today, what I do is the clearing work for people consistently. I'm always doing that. And one of the reasons why, as I was kind of led to do this work, was because by clearing out things, people can progress faster.
Okay.
And our whole thing is speeding up.
Past lives, that before you said people had to do their own work, and now you're starting to realize that you're facilitating it, you're helping them. But don't you think maybe that's just part of our evolution? Maybe we did have to do it ourselves, like you did. You probably had to do it yourself in order to get the wisdom to be able to facilitate for other people. Like, I'm just wondering if that's part of evolution. Now we're at a point where, you know how sometimes it's that 100th monkey thing. So many people had to do it, to learn it, to get it right. And now we have people like you who are able to actually help us, like,
in the 100 monkey thing was about the, in case anybody doesn't know, the monkeys on an island where, one monkey all of a sudden picked up the piece of fruit and decided to wash it in the ocean before she ate it. And then, of course, her children did. And then all of a sudden the whole tribe was doing it. And next thing you know, they noticed on another island, totally separate, all the monkeys started doing the same thing. That's what the story is. But I'm just wondering if as we collectively are kind of evolving, once you've done it well, understand it more intricately, maybe I don't have to learn all the basics of it. I can come to you and you can help me to, like, I know I got to clear something from my past, so then I could come to you. Maybe that's why it's happening.
I agree that I know my original teacher, had said once, he was teaching us in a year what took him 10 years to learn. And I find that I teach my intensive students what's taking me a lot of years to learn in a few months, the basics. And then you've got to go out and prove it for yourself. You've got to go out and do what you have to do and get it more refined for each individual. But I also believe that there is this whole thing which many of us support about time speeding up.
Yes.
And so, by doing, like for me, learning, figuring things out, questioning everything, wanting to see how this worked energetically or didn't work energetically, what happened was that the collective consciousness has definitely grown. But there's also still, as far as I'm concerned, a lot of inaccurate thinking that's still in there, still old thinking, still not really recognizing the shifts that have actually been made, or they have a piece of it, but they don't really understand how that piece works or where it fits in. That's one of the things that I find that I like to be able to get out and speak to people in groups and do workshops around and lectures around in order to help dispel some of the myths that are out there. Because there's a lot of myths that have no relativity into our real world.
But, there's a lot of people who are, we all learn differently. And, some people have to do it themselves. Some people listen to someone else and they get it right away. And it's like, they don't need to do anything else. They just go, resonates with them, makes sense. And then they just apply it. And then there's other people who want to know how it works, how does that happen, right? So I guess we have to recognize that everybody's not going to want to go do all the digging. Like, it's kind of like, for me, it's like scientists, somebody got in there with the microscope and did all the exploring. I just want to know how it works. I just want to know. I don't want to actually cut anything up anymore. I love biology, but I don't like to dissect things or do that kind of thing. But so that's what I'm kind of thinking is like, you're like the scientist is going, you're exploring and digging and dispelling myths and setting aside things that sometimes people have thought for eons. And I'm glad you do it because, well, for one thing, it's not my gift, but I'm glad you do it, and I'm glad you share it, because sometimes people can get on a path of thinking something is a certain way, and without actually practicing it themselves, this is what I say about, I know I'm choppy here, but it feels like the difference between book learning and wisdom. People read stuff and they go, this is the truth, I read it here, and this is the fact. And they have no basis for it other than they read that book. And then they go out and start teaching it and telling other people this is how it works, and they really don't have some of the subtle information that be very critical. Like when people work with you and you're doing something, about past lives, whatever. So I'm not just sitting down and saying, oh, tell me about my past life. You have also the wisdom to know what to tell me, maybe, I don't know if you hold back, but it feels like I never hear anything negative from you. Like, I don't mean negative, but I don't ever hear any of the disaster type of message from you. I don't ever hear that. Now, I don't know if maybe there's nothing in my readings that would indicate that. But don't you feel like you need to have the balance of some earth experience, common sense, tempered with the other wisdom?
Yeah. One of the things, as you mentioned, was taking a book or a tape course and then going, oh yeah, I've got it. It is always being, we have learned through oral, or we have learned via teachers. And I think that having a teacher, per se, a physical teacher, is something that is getting lost with the internet and everything else, and everything accessible out there. And as a writer, writing books, putting my knowledge out there, even though people have said to me, you don't seem to hold anything back. A lot of people write a little bit and hold something back, which is true. I don't ever intentionally mean to hold things back.
Right.
But there's always some little thing that you didn't think of, or it didn't fit in, or whatever. Whereas when you hear a person in person, when you see them, or when it's like when people come to study with me, I had a class last night, so this is quite prevalent in my mind. And I'm saying, hold it. That thinking isn't going to get you where you need to go. Take a look at it this way.
Right.
Apply this way, and remember how this is going to work out. It is only by having that physical teacher who is there that can pull that up in that minute. Or you could build a whole scenario on something that really is misplaced, in a sense, of what the basics is. Now, the other thing I want to address, too, is something that you said about people hear it and resonates it. And that is true. I see this in my soul drawings a lot, where people come in and they've already done a lot of learning in other lifetimes, and they come back. So when they hear somebody say something, it resonates with them or it doesn't.
Yeah.
So it's like, because of their learning, it doesn't make it right or wrong or not. It just is like I followed a path in this life that I have felt in some ways have been led to, and it wasn't like I set out and said, oh, I'm going to do this, and this. Circumstances pulled me into different places. And I have friends who have taken totally different paths than me. And I look at them sometimes and think, what would you do that for? But for them, that's their path. Yeah. And that's how they perceive things. And I always think is, how is it? Are you happy? Is your life working? Are you in a place where you're dealing with your difficulties? Because life is full of difficulties. When we go into past lives, somebody said to me once, well, do we only have all these yucky lives? Well, and the thing is because those are the ones we hooked into emotionally, because most of our emotions that we have, that we're really reaching back, are really from feelings that are not the greatest feelings to feel.
Right.
We don't really somehow go back and pull in on the joy and the love, because they flow easily. It's the ones where we feel angry or frustrated, or we feel rejected. All of those ones where we go back. So, we tie into a whole part of the life, like we pile into one the last time, but really that's just the last time. It's not the only time. So past lives to me, or lives really basically, are really just so important in knowing, or important in one accessibility to those decisions that are made. And when I'm doing my energy releasing work, my transformation work as I call it, I don't go and look at too much at specific past lives unless it crops up in another level. I just clear all the energy around what it is that we're working on, because I'm not really because sometimes it's massive. Sometimes I sit here in my room and I've got a huge bundle of energy that relates to this thing. It would take ages to go through all that. I just clear all that energy, replacing it back into the other lifetimes with more constructive energy, and people feel better. So that's the main thing, right?
But some of the places that you're delving into these days, like with soul origins, I mean, that's not just about past lives. That's about all kinds of lives, and I just wonder, like, why now? Why now on this planet? I mean, it's. I know we're moving into the age of Aquarius, where we've left some other stuff behind, but we've been on the planet a long time, and I'm thinking, maybe there were some masters previously who knew what you know today, but really it wasn't very common. I mean, we didn't hear about that. I mean, actually...
We must remember, in the ancients, everything was done in secret societies, and you would go into, let's just take ancient Egypt, for instance. People went out and looked for gifted people at the age of 7. And they took them into the temples and they trained them. So the regular people had no idea what was going on. This information really only started coming out at the beginning of probably the last century. Maybe a little bit in the 1800s. It was all secret societies. It was all secret schools. My grandmother, for instance, studied with an incredibly intelligent man called Swedenborg. He was an engineer, but also spoke with angels. My grandmother died when my dad was 11, but I heard the stories, and taught her how to do automatic writings and healings. But there were pieces left out. My dad would tell me stories of how she could heal headaches, but she got the headaches. Years later, I was back visiting, and I said, "Do you want to know why your mom got the headache?" It was a matter of a few inches of how she did it. She was pulling the energy from the person into herself and not flipping it on out.
Wow.
That's where the learning element comes on, of understanding energy.
Yeah, and I want to go back to where you were talking about the books and that you don't hold anything back. And a lot of times when I write, and because sometimes you know stuff, like you just know it and you just think everybody else knows it. You just think everybody else does. So when you're writing your book, you would be sharing what you think is profound and new and what have you. So if you did leave something out, it might be something that you just already thought people kind of knew, like at some level. But when you're teaching a course and you have the feedback from the audience or the people in a lecture saying, wait a minute, that doesn't, then it, it triggers something in you, and then you go, oh, I didn't realize that, you were thinking that, or people were thinking that. So I just wanted to make that point, because I know when I'm reading a book, sometimes, you have questions. You go, well, wait a sec. That doesn't feel right to me, or I want to know more about that, or whatever. So by actually having you present, which is awesome that you're still doing this work, Norma, to be able to share this with people, because there aren't a lot of people who have done as much of the sifting and sorting through this stuff as you. Like, I'm not trying to put down anybody else or anything like that. That's not my intention. But it's just that when we have people who really have done their work, we need to really honor that.
Well, thank you. It's for me. When I was studying with teachers that I had, I would come home and figure out what they were saying, and I would run with it, especially in the energetic elements. That's why chakras, for instance, when I first really did some chakra work, I found out the type of chakra work I had been doing before I studied it for a couple of years with a person. I thought all my chakras were just fine. When I get into this other course and we're looking at them from a different perspective, none of my chakras were balanced or organized at all. And so I ended up going home and working with them until today. Actually, it's a book people keep saying I should write called The Expanded Chakra System, because I work with a chakra system that is way, way bigger than what most people talk about. Because there was a new, sort of a new chakra system that's come in to work with the original, what they call the original 7, that is far, far more, makes it far more workable in our modern day. But how do you get that information out? Like I haven't written a book on it. People who study with me, that's very much a big part of what we do when we're opening up and developing the psychic system, because it is a large part of the psychic system. So there's just so many different little things, but mostly it's because I'm just curious. Oh, how does this work? And then I start doing things, and then go, oh, and then I find out, I've got an idea of how this works.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And an idea of how spaceships move through space, because I've been on spaceships now with the soul origin work to see how it happens, to see what takes place. And interestingly enough, it fitted in with something a friend of mine many years ago when I was young and just kind of absorbing things, and would ask questions of what was told to me by this friend who was a great in-depth thinker. And so, you know, life brings along lots of different things. So now it's like, okay, now that I'm in these latter years of my life, the important thing for me is, how do I get this information out? And that's what in the last few months, I've been really considering my life, because I'm not as young as I used to be, so there are some changes happening there. But I really feel I'm not done. Mm-hmm. In starting the awareness for the younger people who are coming up to learn, and it's not about learning, it's coming to understand some of the basics. Because I'm not just I just don't have one thing. I just don't have a tarot. I just don't have past lives. I just don't have psychic development. I sort of am a potpourri of things.
Exactly. And that's why that's what I'm saying, is you can bring in all these things from everywhere else to help you. Plus you have life experience and practical applying these things, seeing what kind of works and what doesn't. And sometimes things will work for one person and not for another. And sometimes that makes people wonder that, oh, well, this doesn't work. Well, it may not work for various reasons. It doesn't have to mean that the actual methodology or understanding doesn't work. It's just that you might have a block, or you might have something that's missing. And that's what I like, is that you're able to look at through the tarot, through the past lives, through the, you know, even your spiritual understandings on money and things like that. All of those things, which you've already written books. And, you know, people can go back and check out your page on letsgetrealchatwithcatherine.com, which has a list of them. And they can still get your books, right? Your books are still available.
So, through my website, or through, you know, or contacting me directly, yeah.
Yeah, and so it'd be great for you to write another book about the chakras and the expansion, because here's where I'm kind of feeling I'm curious about this, because we have all this past life stuff, and you say you're not done, which makes sense to me. We're for all intents and purposes, a lot of people saying that the Earth is already in the fifth dimension. We've raised the vibration. People are expanding into this. There's a lot more people who are noticing, hey, life doesn't actually work the way they were told, or the belief system. But then you have these kids coming in that also, you know, we put labels on them, rainbow kids, crystalline kids, all that kind of stuff. Are they coming in? I mean, imagine you've worked with some, or you've had some knowledge about them. And I'm wondering, are they coming in without the past life garbage? Is that why they're more clear? Are they, because I feel like that's part of your work, is to help us make that bridge, because we have the people like you who have that inside scoop kind of thing, a little more knowledge. Then we have a whole mess of people in between that are just kind of waking up. Some of them are raising these kids that are totally open and loving and simple way of seeing things that are complicated. What do you think? Do they come in already clean, or not clean? That's not the right word, but without.
Yeah, I don't think it's something you can put all across the board. A lot of it will depend on what their soul evolution of what they are. What if they keep? See, the kids that come in and kind of have a sense of what they're here to do. Actually, that I really feel in lots of ways that happened to me. I always had a feeling I was here for a purpose. And most people, a lot of people do, not everybody, but I always felt there was a reason, a bigger reason. Unfortunately, they got railroaded a little bit through some abuse stuff that happened when I was young, but at the same point, it probably made me understand a lot of things as I got older. Now, so when they come in, I think a lot of it is about recognizing still how to interact with the group that came in. Like my kids were just before the Indigo kids came in.
Right.
Remember when, you know, these, and most of them were very badly misbehaved. I often wonder how they're doing now in life, because their parents spoiled them, because they were special.
Yeah.
And I found a lot of the times I thought it was a disservice done to the child.
Yeah.
Because the child didn't learn how to interact with others. They only wanted what they wanted and would scream and holler if they didn't get it. And I thought, and this is an indigo child? This is supposed to be evolved? I didn't get it. Then they called it the crystal children. They seem to be quieter. They seem to be more reserved. That was my sense of them. Yeah. And I think it's like any child that comes in, we all need to be loved. And I'm very glad in my life I was incredibly loved when I was very young. I had 2 older sisters who had boyfriends who became husbands, older parents. I was very loved. And I always felt that made a base for me. And I don't care who or what kind of tag you want to put on somebody. It's about having that sense of who you are. And because that's going to determine how you're going to respond to your world. And yes, the world today is so different from me. Boy, I didn't even have a telephone in my house. I didn't get a TV in my house till I was 15. Like, I think we got a telephone maybe when I was around 13. We didn't have a car. I mean, all these things, that sounds funny, but I didn't have a car when I was little. Didn't have a phone. Didn't have a television.
Yes, well, technology everything's changed so quickly, but I want to go back to what you're saying, about the love, the being the very critical for any child, and I get that, and I also get this sense of when you make a kid special, or make anybody special. We do this with our politicians, we do this with musicians and whatever. We make them special, which takes them out of the normal interactions with humanity because they're different. They're not like us, and that by itself is kind of, to me, it's not very loving to do that to people. To say you're not like us, you're different, and we're going to treat you different. And then how, as a child, even if they have gifts, even if we all have gifts, but if their gifts are more obvious, let's say, and you don't allow them to interact with children who don't have the same gifts, you're not really preparing them very well for the world where there are going to be people with all kinds of different gifts. I just think that's more about separation and attitude, isn't it?
Yes, and I think the one thing that people need to be is to become respectful for others and be responsible for your actions and your words. Now that's hard to teach a child, but it's very definitely, no matter how, because I think we're all special and unique. I really do. I think we're all special and we're all unique.
Yeah.
But that makes us all the same. So what is our speciality, or what is our uniqueness, or what is our whatever? It really makes us the same. And to classify and clarify, it's like what are your actions? What are your deeds? What are you contributing? I know I have a granddaughter who's going to turn 14 in a couple of days, and they don't live near me, and I kind of keep track of what's going on with them from a distance. And it's very interesting just to notice how they are. And her youngest sister, who's 4 years younger, who will turn 10, and then a few more days after that, they all were born kind of around the same time. It's interesting to watch how, even within 4 years, the difference of how they perceive the world, how they perceive it, how they react to it, and go with it. And I think that's what's happening. But at the same point, I'm very fortunate that my daughter-in-law truly believes in manners, truly believes in being polite, and so those 2 girls can go anywhere, and there's a polite. They know how to behave in public.
Yeah, and that's you're speaking to is to giving them the skills. I mean, we don't know when we're babies. We don't know how to interact with other people, so we have to be taught. And I agree with you about everybody's special, everybody's unique expression of the divinity in its own unique way, but it doesn't separate us from everybody else. And that's where I think we sometimes it happens, people do that to people, and to me it's kind of cruel, because if you're you can't play with the other children because you're too wise to whatever, that's ridiculous, because And it's sad. And what you're talking about is manners and social skills, so they can dine with the queen or the pauper and feel very, very comfortable.
Because they're comfortable in themselves. Now, I do know, for instance, that people who have incredibly high IQs and stuff have a difficulty in relating to the world. And I understand that.
Yeah.
But basically, we're talking about the general populace. I think part of what we learn, because life does not come along and just because you're special or your family think you're great and love you and everything, life doesn't come along and give you a free ride, because at some point, all of a sudden, you're going to hit obstacles. So how are you in I call it a thickened way of being able to adapt to when all of a sudden life turns upside down?
Yeah, well, you have to be given those skills, but I just was wondering if the not so much like it kind of hit me, I don't know why, but I was thinking that the maybe these children that are more open to their wisdom, able to share it more clearly and so forth. I wondered if they aren't souls that have done their work many, many lifetimes, and now we're having them come in without the garbage because of where we need to go. Like, if
you could be absolutely correct. I don't know. I really don't know. Only time's going to tell that, because when things start happening, what are they going to be reaching back to get or to obtain? We don't know.
And maybe that's a good thing.
Sorry?
And maybe that's a good thing, because like you're saying, if we're pulling back to a past memory, if they don't have that to go back to, then in the moment, they're going to choose something that makes sense in the moment, not based on the emotion of the past.
That's true.
Which brings me to my next question, which is, if we work with you, or we do this personal work and we clear stuff, then the next time something happens, are we also in that position of being able to make a decision without all the old, like it's brand new, like, oh, well, what am I going to do in this situation? Does that happen to us?
Yes, it does. It's like what I talk when we finish the finish the clearing. What I usually say is, I want you to be aware of your habit. Like, habits are habits. But what you can do when something comes up, you can stop, take a breath, and you're going to be free to make another decision, another choice, another response, because that other, think of it as a backpack on your back, isn't there anymore. So that what's pulling you to say this is how you respond is not there. So very quickly you can begin to respond very, very differently. And it definitely happens. It's happened with myself, and it's happened with many, many other people.
So you take a breath and actually, so whenever you feel yourself reacting in habit, like that's my old way of doing it, and are you more conscious of it after you've done that clearing? Like,
Sometimes, I think you are, because usually when you go to do a clearing, mostly what you're doing is you're stating what you're wanting to achieve. You either want to clear something or you want to create something, either two ways looking at it. So you are aware basically of this is how I want to be. So yeah, it does make it incredibly easy to be able to create and to bring forward and to allow yourself to become in a way that, what would you say, is much, much easier to create, because you're not saddled with that whole thing sticking there. It's just a habit, and the habits can get shifted really fast, very, very fast.
Well, and has it been your experience to see, when you see a person with, many different lifetimes that you do see, would every lifetime have that same theme or habit or whatever in it, and so do you have, like, when you're clearing, do you have to find all the lifetimes that have it, or how do you?
Okay. Now, let's talk about two different things.
Okay.
We're talking about two different things. If we're doing a past life regression, we've only got so much time to clear or transform, heal, whatever, certain amount of lifetimes, right?
Right.
When I'm doing transformation healings, I'm working with a huge big picture of many different systems and levels and all sorts of other things in there. So the past life element is just a small part of a much larger picture. of where we hold this. And sometimes there is a lot of past life energy around, like, yes. And so every lifetime that would be in all this big energy would be the same thing. Sometimes it's just little, and we just need to clear it up. But I could be and this has happened sometimes, I'm working on, let's say, an emotional level, and all of a sudden I get a past life come right out of that energy at me. Like, oh, so this is what happened here, and then I address that then. But
right.
that's not like always, but it does happen sometimes. But the energy of the past lives, sometimes it amazes me how much of a theme that we keep on creating lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. And I know what it feels like when it feels like you've got you've got tied to the chain ankle somewhere, and it's like no matter what you do, no matter who you see, no matter how much stuff you go through to release you from all this, and it's just not happening.
Right.
And yes, it may be past life created, but it's not the only thing that holds you in that place, because so many of these systems that I look at is very often some of the bigger keys.
Well, and if you clear, so I have a habit in this lifetime, and you go back and see other lifetimes, and we do that healing work. Does it heal it for the other lifetimes as well, or
that's my? If it shows up as a past life issue, yes.
Okay.
That's what I like to believe it is anyway.
Yeah.
That's what I work to do, is to transform that energy back there as well.
Right, because and all of these things, other lives, future lives, past lives, are really happening at the same time.
I guess theoretically we're going to say yes, but it's not how we experience it.
Right.
Because we're in that different. We're not operating at the speed of light, so we're in that slower. So it's like. That we come out, well, all things are happening at the same time, and you change this here and that changes there, and it's true that does happen, but I still think for most of our minds, it's like this is the level we work in, this physical, slow moving in a way, even though it's speeding up for us, especially as you get older, it speeds up. And so, yeah, it's creating at the same time, but we don't experience it like that.
Right. So, so are you? I know that you are doing lectures and so forth in your local area, but you're saying now, and it's so because I'm, we're going to share this and with the world. I want to make this statement now because you have so many areas that you teach on. So many areas that you're able to interact with people, lecture on, and do workshops and so forth. So you are willing to travel, and I know Calgary's got a pretty big community that sort of looks at these different things, and so you'd be willing to come to Calgary or Edmonton, or what's your I
usually travel through there every May, around May, June. I usually make a tour through there. Being a little bit low-key the last few years, and this last year I didn't make it at all. I didn't get there. But I'm looking at my next year, and I really want to do some very concentrated traveling and doing different like evening workshops or weekend workshops, so that once more, which is just what I used to do a lot of years ago, and that's what my plan is, and that's what I'm beginning. And I am looking for people, because I used to do all the setup myself. I can't do that anymore just because of age and energy, and
Well, you're putting your energy into other things.
I am looking for people who want to work with me to set up lecture tours or workshop tours, whichever way you want to look at that. Yeah, for sure.
So if you're listening to this, watching this, and connect with Norma, I'll put the links on so you can do that directly and help facilitate something, because I do think that having some in the spring probably would be a good time to start looking at some of this kind of work, because by then, I'm seeing it now. I see a lot more people who previously never commented on the shows or didn't seem to be all that interested in this kind of expanded exploration, which I call exploring higher visions, which is what we're doing about all kinds of things, not just metaphysical, but more people are saying, hey, you know what, I'm tired of just being told by whatever, religion or government or parents or whatever, and I'm not asking anyone to be disobedient to anybody. I'm saying we're knowing it. We're asking, it's time for us to be, there's a difference between being respectful of elders, respectful of our systems, our parents or whatever, and really doing our own work. I think we're not all here to be group mind.
I agree. I think that we individually, our inner connection to our source of being, if we call it God or Allah or whatever, doesn't matter. The name doesn't matter.
Right.
But the knowingness that there is a source that we can connect to that brings to us an understanding, not only of ourselves, but of humanity. I think that's very important to come to terms with and understand. And sometimes energetically, and we talked about having reading from a book and someone being there. I know energetically, by being in a room, things shift just because I'm there.
Yeah.
And I know I have met different teachers at different times where that definitely has been experienced and felt. Yeah. And I know that happens. It's because you show up and you bring with you the energy of who you are.
We really did go more into the past lives today, but what do you at this time feel about we've got a lot of chaos and stuff going on in the planet. Do you have any sort of thoughts about that?
In the world is dissension, and that bothers me. I think the lack of respect and acceptance of differences is huge. And there's a group of us that work to, and it could be a fair percentage, to accept people as they are and to love people and to see the peace. But I've always said, you're not going to have peace outside in the world if you don't have peace on the inside of yourself. That's something I have said for years and years. The joy, the love, the essence. So to me, with what's happening not only with our planet, with our political systems, with we talk about these children that are coming into the world, but what's happening to all these children that are going nuts and shooting people and killing people? We are probably at such huge polarity right now. So it's like somewhere in the middle is that sense of sanity, an awareness of acceptance of differences. I'm not sure how that's going to work out, because it seems to me that as soon as somebody has a different colored skin or a different culture or a different belief system, fingers are pointed, and it's snowballed over the years.
But do you think that as my sense, I mean, I think I wrote something about this on Facebook the other day, was, we've got people who've been doing healing work, light workers, calling themselves different labels, and it doesn't matter what they are, but really having this commitment to peace. And I mean, I look back to about the 60s, and that was kind of when people started to look around and say, hey, we're doing something really weird, but we're still doing it. And this is, what are we talking here? 60 years later, we are still having, we're still having that, just talk. That's how I see it. It's just talk. Like, I see so many encouraging people, encouraging other people, like, love yourself, love your neighbor, we're all the same. And it's like, well, if there's that many people talking like that and actually believing it, how is it that we're having this chaos going on? So I'm wondering if, for me, it feels like now's the time, guys. This is, excuse the expression, but shit or get off the pot. It's time to speak, walk your talk, not just talk about it anymore. Like, I don't know. I'm not advocating anything other than putting it into practice.
That's the thing. How you can put it into practice in your community, in your home, in your community, but how do you get it into practice unless you get into the political situation? And what happens to so many people that go in with the idealism, they find they can't do anything.
I went down that road, and the system isn't really conducive to peaceful type of thought. It's not conducive. I mean, if you think about it, and I'm not trying to even criticize, it's this system. You have the government and you have the opposition. What's their job? To attack each other. That's it. What kind of, by virtue of the design is to one person's wrong, one person's right. And so for me, I think part of raising that vibration is to have shows like this where we actually do talk to each other and say, hey, that person's all right. That person is got some good ideas and I'm not afraid of them anymore. I mean, that, to me, fear is a big part of it.
I've got one point I want to make here. When we work with peace inside and put the thought form out, we've got to remember the collective consciousness is there. I thought a lot about this because I couldn't figure out, like, you know, with people are starving in Africa and now they're dying of Ebola, and then there's war in the Middle East that's exploding. But if you have people who present peace thoughts, and I have had an experience where this has worked in my world, then what happens, that collective consciousness is out there, and if the person wants to reach into it, they can bring it into themselves and begin to have a different feeling and a different perception. And I think that we must hold that vision of knowing that thought form of peace, acceptance of each other, a respect for each other. Even if we don't agree with what they're doing and saying, that thought form can be reached if they so choose. It's like when you're depressed and it's all dark. If a beam of light comes in there and says, hey, this is a way out, you have a choice to stay in the dark or to look at that beam of light and start crawling out. And I think those of us that are in the light work of phase will say that. We must remember that the collective consciousness is there. It is there, and it is there for a purpose. That even though it may feel like we're not achieving too much, it's individuals. It's the individual who is at the despair and says, oh, God, help me. And they have this feeling of peace that comes into their heart because they reached out. It's the person that says, show me a direction, I'm lost. And that a vision that comes into them somehow to be able to feel a bit more peaceful, even though in that moment of great despair.
Well, and I love what you're saying, and I love that I mean, that's what's going to happen is we have to fill up that bank account up there so people have access to it. But the other part that does trouble me sometimes is that people who are kind of following, you know, the spiritual path, they ignore, or they won't even, it's like it's a separate thing. And again, and I go back to the separation thing. It's like taking a child and putting them away from the rest of the children. You're doing all this light work, you're connecting to source, and then you're saying, but politics doesn't matter. The fact that there are hungry children, you know, it's not my thing. I'm doing my workshop on light, and that's, you guys got, you know, it seems like we're separating again instead of taking our wisdom and our loving, peaceful hearts and looking at things. I'm not saying you have to get involved. I'm not saying you have to join a group or anything. I'm just saying at least you can be in neutrality. You can say, like you're saying, there's stuff going on in the world. Why is that happening? It just, to me, it feels like we need to,
Don't ask why. I don't ask why, Catherine.
Okay.
We know why it's happening.
Yeah.
It's a power struggle. It's definitely a power struggle.
Yeah.
It's definitely created by groups of people who want to be in power one way or the other. I mean, there's lots written about that.
Yeah,
I'm with you. I certainly don't bury my head in the sand about those kind of things.
No.
But I also accept that I can't make a huge difference to what's going on out there except holding what I know to be true. Because I do spend a lot of neutrality looking at different things. Because I think as a responsible being on the planet, you need to be aware, not put your head in the sand, and need to be aware of how come certain groups control things. How come, one of the things, I'll just say, one of my pet peeves, this is a pet peeve when you talk about starving children, is that as a government, they can say, oh, we're going to give 30 million or billion or whatever to this and that, and we've got people starving here. Our medical system needs a lot of support. We've got older people that are needing to be looked after properly, and yet all of a sudden, this big world out there, we have all this money for them. And to me, it's like, let's take care of our own. Let's make sure people have housing and medical and food. We still have children going to school hungry.
And the money, and I mean, sending the money, that's always been absurd. It's the old thing. I mean, you're contaminating their crops so they don't have food. That's what they need. They don't need your money. A lot of times people have been fine until they had somebody interfered.
I understand that. I definitely do. So when we have the spiritual side of things, and then we have the political side of things. And the thing is, I think we've got to be aware. Like I was listening to some fund that was being sent somewhere, and I thought, well, where does all this money come from? Or maybe it's the same money. They just keep giving over and over, and it never really gets there.
Well, money isn't real either. You know that. Our system of money is, I mean, that just comes out of thin air. I mean, it's just...
If they keep giving the same, it's like, does it really reach? Does it really get there? Because we don't really hear about that. We just hear about all the money they're giving away.
Yeah.
And it's not that I want those people not having help. It's just that, it's the old thing. Let's take care of our own backyard as well. Let's make sure our children are fed, our children are housed, our children are clothed in an effective way.
Yeah.
Without judgment.
It's the old this and that. We don't have to choose. We don't have to choose between, who needs it more. I mean, and that's how I always feel, is there is an abundance on this planet. The problem isn't that. It's about distribution. That's the problem. And good food, not... Anyway.
Ammo.
Yeah, I just wanted to, kind of address it because I feel like, it's time for people to at the very least, see the world, and take your beautiful spiritual understandings and apply them. And if it's only in prayer, that's fine too. I mean, it's
sure. Oh, hey, yeah. I'm really right behind all that as well.
Yeah.
And it's like, for me, we all have our bit to play.
Yeah.
in our lives, and sometimes it can be a little bit. Like my neighbor came over the other night and brought me some food. Twice she's done that recently, actually, which has been very helpful, as I'm by myself and I don't always feed myself as well as I could. To me, that's a tremendous generosity that I appreciate. Mm-hmm. And it's like I'm very fortunate to having friends and students that help me a great deal because I live by myself.
But that's the kind of thing that does change the world.
Yeah,
it is. You do what you can do. There's a movie which has always been one of my favorite movies around Christmas time. It's called One Magic Christmas, and it's Mary Steenburgen, which maybe I'm saying her name wrong. Anyway, looks like it was filmed in Northern Ontario, and it is exactly that difference. It's like something happens, and her husband gets shot. And by this guy robs a bank, and I mean, I've seen it so many times I practically know it verbatim. But anyway, the guy's desperate and he robs the bank, and her husband's in the bank, and he ends up getting killed. So she now is in mourning, and she just doesn't believe in magic of any kind. Everything is going to hell in a handbasket, and life is awful. But she has, it's a very... Some people might call it cheesy, but I think it's awesome because it is speaking to one moment, how a smile, how a gift we give can change a person's life. And so she has the opportunity, it happens magically because it's Christmas, of course, but that she gets to see the difference. She's at the same gas station in the morning, and this guy, she sees him and he's really upset and he's feeling desperate, and she pays for his gas or buys whatever. And of course, he doesn't rob the bank, right? And now all of a sudden he's like overwhelmed with joy, like somebody cares about me. And it did change her life. And I know it's a movie, and I'm not trying to say anything other than the fact that it is how it is. You don't know.
Have you? Like I've been on toll bridges and stuff, and people have put in, say, for the next 3 people or whatever.
It's beautiful.
And that whole giving element, which unfortunately people put sometimes to Christmas, but happens all the time.
Yeah.
What can you do? What can you give? How can you be? And it's true. That's living your philosophy. That's not just making it a theoretical thing.
Yeah. And that's to me, that's just a perfect example of, a lot of people say, I can't do anything, the problems are too big. They're not. The problems, it's like the domino effect. So I love it. I think we can wrap this up and just let everyone watching know. I mean, first of all, do whatever it is that makes your heart sing, and check out Norma's page on letsgetrealchattingwithcatherine.com if you want to bring her to your community and do lectures and make those connections. And I'm sure we're going to chat again real soon. Norma, is there anything else you want to end with?
No, I just want to say God bless and enjoy your life. Enjoy.
That's a good one. I love that. All right. Well, until next time, take care.
Wasn't that amazing? Thank you to my guests for sharing with us today. Thank you for watching. Feel free to share the link. You can join us for live shows by going to letsgetrealchattingwithcatherine.com and listen to the replays from the show page, preview guests, and explore links to our Facebook fan page, WordPress blog, and more. We are creating an exquisite world. Until next time, take care.